the last couple MCU projects have not piqued my interest slightly or even remotely. I haven't watched all the shows. I haven't watched any of the movies. And I'm going to be honest with you, the Fantastic Four marketing didn't seem all that interesting to me. And I'll explain why in a moment. It was an interesting marketing campaign because we were also on the heels of some really, in contrast, some really explosive, energized marketing that was James Gunn's Superman movie, where every single trailer, every single fleeting moment, people, the fan base, the James Gunn stans, the people who were merely curious about that project were salivating at the bit to get any semblance of new footage, new visuals, new information related to that project. And I didn't really see that with Fantastic Four First Steps. Because in my opinion, those trailers, the way they're edited, they're expecting that you're already excited for the characters, because those trailers rarely showed the team dynamic, the characterization of each one of their members to show you how different this reboot is to the prior reboots. The closest we may have gotten was, that, okay, with Eban's iteration of the Thing. That was like the closest semblance that we got of like, you know what? They're giving me a taste of what this character is. I'm getting something out of this movie, if anything at all. And of course, you had the visuals of the movie displayed in the trailers. You had a lot of scenes that basically ended up being cut in the film. But anyways, the trailer was playing and was edited to create a sense of wonder and awe for people who were already programmed to love this movie even before it came out. What am I talking about? I'm talking about, the MCU fans that'll love anything unconditionally that they make. That was a trailer that was made for people expecting to already be excited for the film just because it was the MCU's, the Marvel Studio iteration of the Fantastic Four. There was a lot riding on F4. From a business perspective, from the fan perspective, many things. Marvel has not been doing all that great lately. People were like, can Marvel finally give us a decent Fantastic Four movie? And not only did they did, in this critic's opinion, but they delivered what in my eyes is top 10 Marvel Studios pictures. I was incredibly pleased with the Fantastic Four First Steps. I thought it was an incredibly fun movie, extremely entertaining, not perfect, but just what the MCU needs right now. Let me get into it. First off, Matt Shakman, the director of the film. I would like to apologize to him because I was kind of a naysayer. I was a little opposed or a little repelled by the idea because I'm of the few who really doesn't enjoy WandaVision all that much. I think it's incredibly overrated, at least in my opinion. There are a lot of things that maybe you think are overrated that I love. It's okay. That's the subjectivity of art. I'm not the biggest fan of WandaVision, and I was incredibly concerned personally that a major director from the WandaVision TV show was going to helm the Fantastic Four. Because I was like, dude, is this guy already so one note that he can't help himself but have to hinge an entire project on an old-timey 60s aesthetic, much like what WandaVision was in its first few episodes? Now he's implementing it again in the Fantastic Four, but just applying it to an entire city because it's going to be a different universe because of the multiverse shenanigans and whatnot. I was like, but it actually ended up winning me over after the first few minutes. The aesthetic of that world and the sheer scale of how much the movie is actually allowing you to see is pretty interesting. Interesting in the fact that the world and the city kind of plays a part in the story in the midpoint. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. It has to do with Sue Storm and her baby. It was in the trailer. In the trailer, they show Franklin being born already, so it's not really a spoiler. I was actually pretty impressed of how much world building they were able to squeeze out of. I mean, it's not the focus of the film. It's not like the world's greatest world building, but there's enough to, it does manage to make a pretty strong impression to a point when that exact same world is jeopardized by this, impending threat. You actually kind of care for the people. I'm reminded of those scenes in Lord of the Rings where you would have this gigantic battle happening and then it would just cut to the civilians just curdling in the corner of a room, just, tears in their eyes, just freaking out over the situation. It's giving you the impression of the humanity that's at stake. And that's something that, I'm going to be honest, I didn't even feel during Infinity War or Endgame. But I felt it with Fantastic Four. So I was like, you know what? I kind of want to see the Fantastic Four defeat this threat for the sake of this world, because you're giving me reasons to actually care for them, at least enough. It's not, I'm not talking, it's like, Spider-Verse levels of world building where they're actually, point by point, bit by bit explaining and giving you emotional pathos to every single conceivable detail. It's good enough to where it manages to leave a lasting impression, which I really appreciated. I thought Matt Shakman directed the out of the movie. For a comic book movie, for what it is, of course. It's not, it's not Denis Villeneuve, it's not Nolan. But for Marvel Studios, F4 First Steps is honestly one of the best directed films in the entire saga, including the TV shows. There are a lot of beautiful shots in this film. Beautiful shots. There's a shot that I believe was revealed in one of the trailers. It has to do with Silver Surfer and Johnny Storm, contrasted with the sun when they're up in the upper atmosphere, that I thought was beautiful. Galactus' sequences were shot incredibly intimidatingly to show you the scale and size of this being. It's pretty impressive. I was incredibly impressed with how much I was noticing details like this during Fantastic Four. I was like, damn, this Matt Shakman, unlike 99% of other MCU directors, save for, Gunn, Coogler, or the Russo brothers, I'd throw in Destin Daniel Cretton in there too. Matt Shakman, man, he seemed to have like a legit passion for this project, which I thought was incredibly refreshing for the MCU recently. Because even Thunderbolts, a film that I really enjoyed, this seemed to have been like on another level. Every set piece is incredibly well constructed to really show off the scale and grandness of every concept that they were able to dream up. Galactus' ship, the actual planet where the Fantastic Four originate, the action sequences, the way the camera swishes around and shows you and knows when to cut, it's very, very pleasing to watch, actually. It harkens back to old school Marvel. And I mean that, of course, in the best way possible. A lot of people were talking about like, hey, this feels like classic peak MCU. And honestly, I have to agree. Because the Fantastic Four First Steps movie actually lets you give a fucking damn over the characters. The Fantastic Four themselves are great in this movie. You feel their dynamic together. You feel their love and bond with one another. You have sequences, moments, character scenes, dialogue scenes within each one of the conceivable switch-ups or matchups that you can think of. You have a couple of scenes of Johnny and Reed. You have Reed with the Thing. You got scenes with Ben and Storm, and then Storm with Johnny, and they're always very meticulously made to really showcase the individual relationships within each and every single one of them as a group, but also as, as brother and sister, as husband and wife, as best friend and best friend. Vanessa Kirby's Sue Storm. I loved her. I thought she was great. Performance-wise and character-wise, this is what I want Marvel to do with their characters. Elevating them. Showing you different facets of them. I don't think it's that controversial to say that Sue Storm has never been that much of. She's never been, people's most popular or favorite character to pick off of the original Fantastic Four lineup. My God, she's my favorite character in this movie. She gets stuff done. She has stake in the plot. She actually, if stuff ain't working out, Sue Storm is probably going to figure out a way out of it using communication, using, her motherly instincts when we're talking about her child. She fixes a lot more than Reed, if you really think about it. If you see the movie, you'll understand what I'm trying to say. And it's actually, I thought it was going to have done it. I heard about how they were going to elevate Sue Storm in this film, and I was excited and open about it, but I also wanted there to be a balance. I wanted everybody to have, a specific moment. Everybody has a moment to shine. Everybody. Johnny Storm, pretty much my favorite Johnny Storm that we've had to date in film. Easily. I mean, we don't have that much to go off of, but I think Cosmonaut Variety Hour summed it up best. It's a perfect combination between, horny, heroic, and silly and fun. I love Johnny in this movie. Joseph Quinn, he's a much more restrained Johnny Storm. He's playing it with, a little bit more confidence. Like, he's not smiling all that long. He's not as goofy as, Chris Evans but he also isn't as, completely, devoid of any emotion. Like, sadly, Michael B. Jordan was in his iteration of Johnny Storm in Fantastic. Not to his fault. That was, mostly, the studio, the director, the writer, and the movie around him just wasn't all that good. But Johnny Storm in this movie, I thought was really, really cool. They nailed this character. I'm excited, hopefully, to see this character with Tom Holland. Because, in the comics, Peter Parker and Johnny Storm are like BFFs. Iban, cousin from The Bear. I forget how to pronounce his last name. I thought he was great. Dude, conceptually, the casting to get, Iban from The Bear as Ben Grimm. When I heard that, like, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, whenever they announced the Fantastic Four, I was like, oh my God. That's effing perfect. If you've seen The Bear, he's basically playing like Ben Grimm in that show. He's perfect. I'm also keeping the water bottle away from the laptop because you never know, right? The Thing, Sue Storm, Pedro Pascal. I'm going to be honest, I'm feeling a bit of Pedro Pascal fatigue. I've already seen him in Eddington. Every week on The Last of Us. I loved Materialist. I loved him in that. I thought he was a good Mandalorian. I was like, Pedro Pascal as Reed Richards, how is that going to work? And I have to say, I ended up really, really liking him. I thought he ended up working out pretty well. I like sequences with dialogue that really, there are specific dialogue moments with each and every single one of those members that really just hit to the bone marrow of what those characters are all about. And I thought that was incredibly satisfying to watch because for once their dialogue actually matches their actions. They feel like the Fantastic Four. Each member feels like how you would expect them to feel, even though they are, changing a little bit from the original source material because they're giving a little bit more importance to certain other characters and giving more stake and more, I'll just say, more autonomy to certain characters that haven't had that much autonomy in stories in other Fantastic Four, projects, which I thought was really, really refreshing to watch. Like, specifically with Sue Storm, this is pretty much, the best Sue Storm I think we're ever going to get in live action film. I mean, we've only had 4 right now, I'm acting as if there's been, it's like James Bond. It's like, oh my God, Sue Storm, and there's like 17, no. But she was great. Dude, who knew we were going to get a character arc for the Silver Surfer? I was really excited to see Shala Ball's debut in a film. I like Shala Ball. I always liked her visually. I haven't read any comic stories with her, but I always thought, the Silver Surfer, aesthetic and character design, I think aesthetically looks cooler when it's like a female body. So I was like, I've known about Shala Bal for like years just because I really like her characters. I just think she looks cooler than, Norman, whatever his name is, Norman Rad. I don't know. I don't really remember what the original Silver Surfer's name was. So apologies for that. But I thought she was so cool, man. Then they actually gave her stuff to do. They gave explanations. They gave her backstory that I didn't really expect. It's fleeting, the amount of, stuff that they add to her mythos and the stuff that they have her to do. It's pretty fleeting. But the character design, the VFX in this movie in general are very, very impressive for a Marvel movie when you compare them to like Quantumania. Or even like, dude, there are some buildings in Brave New World that look completely fake and so blurry. This movie looks pretty damn good for a Marvel movie. It's very immersible. If that makes sense. And Galactus, no spoilers, but I'll just say I'm excited to see if we get to see him again. I thought the Fantastic Four First Steps was a very, very good Marvel movie. I loved the Fantastic Four First Steps. And right now, my personal promise that I made to myself, and I'm going to be honest with you, I've been very wishy-washy with the MCU. There's a lot of other projects that I'm not going to watch from the MCU. I'm not going to watch Eyes of Wakanda. I'm not going to watch Wonder Man. I'm not. With Marvel TV shows, you watch one, you've pretty much seen them all. They all have the same problems that I can no longer tolerate, personally at least. But in terms of the movies, a lot of the movies I haven't been that fond of either. I don't think they're bad, I just think they're worse. And you know why? Because what's worse than being bad, irritating, horribly constructed, terribly made? Boring. Because like a bad dream, you forget about them. To me, that's worse. And I made a pact with myself. I'm going to give Marvel two last chances. I think it's refreshing that Phase 6, the end of the multiverse saga, has the potential to be, from a theatrical standpoint, the best phase that the MCU has ever made because it's so simple, non-complicated, and it just hinges on extremely fan-favorite characters that me personally I've always wanted to see. We only got 2 Avengers movies. We got the debut of Victor Von Doom. Secret Wars is going to be adapted. A Spider-Man movie and a Fantastic Four movie. That's like if Robert became Kevin Feige for a day. It's like, screw you guys. We're just going to have an entire phase of 7 different Daredevil movies with Charlie Cox. We're going to adapt Muse, but right. Anyways, I told myself I'm not going to watch Doomsday or Secret Wars if First Steps and Brand New Day don't impress me. We're 1 out of 2. Fantastic Four First Steps. Right now with Marvel, I've been pretty hesitant to, am I still going to be watching Marvel? Probably not in a few years at the rate that they're at right now. But right now, I'm like, after Fantastic Four, I'm like, okay, Marvel. All right, Marvel. I'm listening.